You know someone who makes six figures and somehow has $300 in their checking account? You also know someone who makes 40,000 a year and somehow has 30,000 saved. Same country, same economy, same access to banks and credit cards, and the same internet full of financial advice. So why does one of them sleep fine at night and the other one checks their balance with their eyes half closed, hoping the number is better than they remember? Most people assume the answer is income. Earn more, worry less. But that's not actually what separates these two people. It's something almost nobody talks about, and once you see it, you can't unsee it in your own life. My name is Nick, and today we're going to look at the real reason broke people stay broke, and it has almost nothing to do with how much they earn. Let's start with a study that quietly reshaped how psychologists think about poverty. Sendhil Mullainathan, an economist at the University of Chicago, spent years studying what happens to the human brain under financial scarcity. His research found something strange. When people are worried about money, their measurable cognitive bandwidth actually drops. Not their intelligence, their available mental processing power in that moment. Scarcity doesn't just take your money, it taxes your thinking. It's like running 15 browser tabs in your head at all times, and one of those tabs is always whispering about the rent that's due in 6 days. So here's the question worth sitting with. If income isn't the deciding factor, what is? The answer is something researchers call financial identity. It's not what you earn, it's who you believe you are when money is involved. And that belief, more than any paycheck, decides where you end up. Think about two people who both just got a bonus. One of them opens a savings account that same week and moves the money before they can touch it. The other one feels a small itch, a kind of relief, and within days that bonus becomes new shoes, a nicer dinner, a spontaneous weekend trip. Neither of them is a bad person. Neither of them made a dumb decision in isolation. But one of them has an identity that says, I am someone who protects money. The other has an identity that says, money is for enjoying right now, because who knows what tomorrow brings. That second belief isn't laziness. It's often inherited. It's often a direct, reasonable response to growing up in a household where saving never seemed to matter, because nothing ever felt stable enough to save toward. This is where behavioral economist Brad Clontze's work on money scripts becomes useful. Klontz studied how people absorb beliefs about money before the age of 7, often without a single word being spoken. A parent's stress at the grocery checkout, a hushed argument about a bill, a grandparent's offhand comment about rich people being greedy or about poor people being lazy. These moments become scripts, and scripts run quietly in the background for decades, shaping decisions that feel like free choice but are actually just old programming replaying itself. Here's a question. Have you ever made a financial decision and immediately felt like it wasn't fully yours? Like some older, younger version of you made the call and you just watched it happen? That's a money script talking. Now, none of this means broke people are simply broken. It means they're running an old operating system that made sense once and doesn't anymore. And the tragedy is that most financial advice completely ignores this. It hands people a spreadsheet and says, just spend less than you earn, as if the problem were arithmetic. But arithmetic was never the real obstacle. If it were, everyone with a calculator would be financially free. Let's talk about what actually keeps someone stuck, because it's more specific than most people realize. It comes down to 3 overlapping habits of mind, and you've probably lived at least one of them. The first is what we can call the horizon problem. People who stay broke tend to think in extremely short time frames. Not because they're incapable of long-term thinking, but because scarcity trains the brain to focus only on the next threat. Remember Mullainathan's research. When your bandwidth is consumed by this week's bills, there's simply nothing left over to plan 5 years out. Wealthy people, by contrast, often think in decades almost by default, not because they're smarter, but because their environment gave them room to. The second habit is emotional spending as regulation. This one is uncomfortable, so stay with me. For a lot of people, spending isn't really about the object being bought. It's about managing a feeling. Stress, boredom, grief, even happiness. A purchase becomes a quick dose of control in a life that often feels out of control. Researchers who study impulse buying have found that the emotional relief from spending often lasts less than an hour, but the financial consequence lasts far longer. It's a trade that feels good in the moment and terrible in the aggregate. The third habit is comparison drift. This is the quiet killer. Social media didn't invent comparison, but it industrialized it. Every scroll is a parade of other people's highlight reels, and the brain, which evolved to gauge social status by comparing itself to the tribe around it, has no idea it's now comparing itself to millions of curated strangers. So people spend not to enjoy their life, but to keep pace with a race they never agreed to enter. Now here's where it gets hopeful, because none of these three things are permanent traits. They're patterns, and patterns can be interrupted. The first shift that changes everything is what psychologists call an implementation intention. Instead of vaguely deciding to save more, you decide precisely when and how. Not, I'll save some of my next paycheck. Instead, the moment my paycheck hits, $200 moves automatically to a separate account before I see it. Studies on habit formation consistently show that removing the moment of decision removes the moment of failure. You can't talk yourself out of a transfer that already happened. The second shift is naming the identity before the behavior changes. This sounds almost too simple, but researchers who study behavior change, including James Clear's widely cited work on identity-based habits, have found that lasting change happens when someone stops trying to do a new behavior and starts believing they are a new kind of person. Not, I am trying to save money. Instead, I am someone who saves money. It's a small linguistic shift with a large psychological weight, because humans are remarkably consistent with how they see themselves once that self-image sets. The third shift is the hardest and the most important. You have to slow down the moment between impulse and action. Just slow down. Even 10 seconds helps. That's the space where an old money script would normally take the wheel. If you can notice the impulse rising and just pause, you interrupt decades of automatic behavior with one deliberate breath. It's not willpower in the dramatic gritted teeth sense, it's awareness. And awareness, unlike willpower, doesn't run out by the end of the day. Here's something worth sitting with. The people you know who seem effortlessly good with money are rarely more disciplined than everyone else in every part of their life. They've simply automated the decisions that used to require discipline. They removed themselves from the equation at the exact moment temptation would strike. That's not a personality trait, that's a system. And systems can be copied by anyone, regardless of income. So let's come back to our two people from the beginning. The six-figure earner with $300 in the bank isn't lacking income. They're lacking a system and possibly running a script installed before they could read. The person making $40,000 a year with $30,000 saved isn't smarter or luckier. At some point, often without fully realizing it, they built an identity around protecting their future self, and then they built small automatic systems that made that identity easy to maintain. This is genuinely good news, if you let it be, because it means the path forward has nothing to do with landing a better job or winning the lottery or waiting for some future version of yourself who magically has more self-control. It means the path forward starts with one uncomfortable but freeing question. What did money mean in the house you grew up in? Sit with that for a second, because whatever the honest answer is, it's probably still running quietly in the background of every financial decision you make today. You don't have to fix your whole financial life this week. You just have to interrupt one pattern, automate one transfer. Notice one impulse before it becomes a purchase. Say one new sentence about who you are with money, and mean it a little more each time you say it. Because in the end, the people who stay broke were never missing money. They were missing a system that outlasts a bad mood. And the people who build wealth were never particularly gifted. They just stopped waiting to feel ready and built the system before the feeling ever arrived.